I'm going to talk about the end of life directives, so to say, and we'll try to finish my presentation in the specific timelines which are given. And if there are some other things which we need to discuss and talk about, we would be there in and around the table. So to begin with, allow me to just portray some landscape in terms of the global material extraction. I'm just trying to put some prospects in front of everyone. If we just have a look to the century plus around 110 years, the data, you will see that the global challenge on the resources extraction has just doubled in 30 years. What was done from 1900 to 1980, within the last 30 years, it has been doubled. What is going to happen by 2050? Are we going to left with some kind of resources or not? Big question. If I portray another study in terms of humanity, ecological footprints, and the number of planets, you will see we already have hit the threshold once in 70s. So humanity footprints first already have exceeded. And what we see now, and with the kind of resource consumptions we are going with, we are already utilizing the resources equivalent to 1.5 Earth. If the global economic development continues in the business as usual mode, and if we see that 30 to 40% further population would add on by 2050, we should expect another sharp rise in the global material extractions very soon. So the reduction of the global material use is must, but it is a big question. Is it possible now? Because what is done is done. There is one more thing. Can we utilize or stabilize it at the current level if it is possible? It will require major reductions in the metabolic rates. So what is the way out? The secondary resource material, or looking at the waste, not as a waste but resources, and creating circular economy models, is something which at least can contribute to the stabilization of the resource extraction to the current levels in some or the other way. If you even talk about the projections of India, the situation is not very, very fine. You see, India has highest resource extraction pressure of around 1,600 tons per acre. If you talk about the global average, it is 1/3 than the global average. So in countries like India, situation is even worse when we talk about the resource crunch. So if I say that since 50% of the population live in this Asia Pacific region, any kind of a decision which would be made there in India or China will have a global footprint, will have a global impact. There is no doubt about this. That's why whatever is to be done here has to be very consciously done, judicially, responsibly. For example, the post-shredder techniques, I will talk about few of them, which are a good possible solution to the auto shredder residues in European Union and other such countries where the cost of labor is very high. It may work there, but it may not work in India. We talked about this earlier also. Coming on to the end of life vehicle managements, we already know that there is a established ISO for the supply chain management, which have all these parts. All of us know them: pre-treatment, dismantling, baling, shredding. I don't need to get into it. There are other studies which divide it into various stages: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we will see where other parts of the country and where India do stand towards the end of my presentation. To begin with, getting into it, we are aware of that what are the basic management processes of an end of life. We have all these things, dismantling and all that. Then probably we have the next thing, which is talking about shredders, where we do have, with the help of magnetic separators, we have the ferrous, heavy fluff, which you see in the middle. You see the highlighted one, the light fluff. All this is auto shredder residue, the residue which comes out. And then again, we have to process, further investigate, further do some work on the post-shredder treatments. There are co-incinerations or use of the thermal chemical processes which are available. Pyrolysis and gasifications are the few which already are proven. So it's a huge kind of work. That's how the overall shredder plant's layout looks. There is very high energy intensive and quite number of systems within the systems, and that's how it makes the overall shredder plant. If I just pick out, these are some of the pictures from a study done in an Italian plant where some energy audits were done. I just want to make a mention of this top left. You see, if we talk in terms of energy also, it's around 44 kilowatt hours per ton of input material. That much huge amount of energy is required. If you convert that in terms of CO2, it's 40 kgs per CO2 equivalent. So huge amount of emissions are also associated when we talk about the shredders and such techniques. Just to pick one more example of the high energy intensive motors, there are reported in this specific case 300 HP. If I just put, let's say, 8 hours a day, 300 HP, one specific motor, it is equivalent to around 1500 tons of CO2 equivalent per day. That is the level of energy carbon intensity we are talking about. Allow me to dig into what with one example of Germany, that how the dismantling and recycling is working. I'll go a little fast on this. We have around, it is from 2020, it is from Uber, the reference, and there are around 500,000 ELVs, which is being divided, if say 100 kg each. They have around 1100 authorized dismantling facilities. You have the spare part fluids and other things which goes onto the right side. Then the stripped vehicles come in, mixing it with further scrap from other resources. The material goes into the shredder plants, and then you have the shredder iron, which is through magnetic filters, comes out, and then again you have the auto shredder residue, which comes out. But then to deal with the auto shredder residue, allow me, the composition, if you have a look to the auto shredder residues, you have plastic, rubber, metal, textiles, whatnot. But there are two things. There is a hazardousness also associated with it, but also there is a resource potential. For example, there are lead, cadmium, some polychlorinated biphenyls, some brominated flame retardants, which are there in the plastics. But on the other hand, you see onto the last line, there are even 8% of metals and 40% of polymers that can be recovered. So that's how there has to be a balance between the two when we talk about. On an average, the slide, this one meant to make a mention that somewhere around 20 to 25 is the auto shredder residue which comes out, which is dealt and treated in various countries in different manners. So if I just come up with few bullet points, treatment of auto shredder residue is most important process in ELV management. When we already talked about hazardousness, we have also talked about the resource in it. So both have to be dealt. And most of the countries with legislative ELV system, they commonly set targets for recovery rates of the auto shredder residue, which is pretty common, 90-95%, and we will see in few of the slides also. Allow me, I will skip few of not so very important points. I have skipped a few in there, but on an average, I will be picking up all. It is just to keep the timelines. In regards to the auto shredder residue recycling in European Union, there are two directions. One is they are also looking after the intensive dismantling these days, and then after the shredder, post-shredder techniques also. It is already proven, and there are various such kind of examples available and documented, that intensive dismantling would reduce the generation of auto shredder residues, not only in terms of the burden on the shredders, but also in terms of hazardousness. This is going to help a lot. And my last, as I mentioned, the carbon energy intensive process, even you talk about the light fraction of the shredded particles which are shown, you have to really work with further processing and all that. So is this problem of auto shredder? With this one slide, I just want to make one specific point. It's a study of 20 years of, it's a little old, but it makes a significant input. 20 years of the material in German cars from 80s to 20,000, if you'll see, have a look to the ferrous metals and you will find that the ferrous metals are decreasing to a great extent. Other than that, the non-ferrous, the plastics and textiles, all of them are increasing. In some cases are doubled also. What I'm trying to mention is that auto shredder residue is mainly coming because of the plastic, textiles and all such kind of things, and they are increasing. Reason is simple. They are increasing because of the fuel efficiency portion to make the vehicle light. So they are going to increase anyhow in the time to come also in the manufacturing of the automobile. So the problem of auto shredder residues is also not going to go down in the near future. It is going to increase because materialistically they are going to increase. I would just give a glimpse of the ELV. Like there are two examples from Europe and Japan, how it is working. One is making somewhere around Japan, it is said it's 98 to 99% of the ELV is done. That's how is the flow chart. The ELV comes after depollution, dismantling, car hulls. Ultimately, the ferrous fractions and all that, it is somewhere around the blue chart you see, somewhere around 10 to 12%, or in some case, 2 to 8%. This is the ASR, which is the further liability on which they have to go for landfilling, keeping their specific targets in mind. And that's how every individual, even the states, are doing a lot of efforts to reduce it to come under the brackets of the targets which are given to them. So if I just give you 3-4 examples, I'm also checking the time. In Europe, if you say so, that was the first directive, 2053 EC, which was brought by the EU Commission, and it was talking about the concept of extended producer responsibility. The aim was basically to control the generation and the disposal of waste from the automobiles. Directive was based on a subsidiary principle where all of the member states must establish their national legislations on the ELV recycling system. Plus, the member states are also, required to meet the targets. And if I just touch upon the targets, they were earlier down, but now after 2015, 95 to 85% under the terms of resource recovery and reuse and recycling. These are the targets which they do have to, abide with. If you talk in terms of what is happening in the United States, you will see that here the situation is and the scenario is, and the overall management is different. It is automotive recyclers associations who do the bulk of the regulations. There is no such specific law as such, but more emphasis is given on the promotion of environmentally sound management. In particular, dioxins, furanes, polychlorinated, aromatic hydrocarbons, greenhouse gas, all these are to be monitored to the great extent. Even chromium, mercury, brominated flame retardants, phthalate compounds, all them. So ELV recycling program subject of strict monitoring under the laws when we talk about the US, and these are few of the laws which are in there. Plus, in addition to that, the state government also imposed their own regulations. In Korea, there are different systems. Interestingly, they already had EPR on the waste management policy, but then afterwards in 2008, they have come across with the further enhancement, and they are working on both the ways, preventive and follow-up management. If you talk about Japan, they have different, because we all will agree that to reduce the ASR due to the shortage of the disposal site, they have different kind of mechanism which they have generated under the policy regime for tackling the end-of-life vehicle and for tackling the auto shredder residue problem, so to say. And not only these laws, even the implementation. I just pick up one such a small example of, let's say, Austria. You see, there are number of motor vehicles per 1,000 people, and this is the total number of vehicles. And you will see in a small country like Austria, you will find there are around 1,500 collection points. There are 4,000 car dealers. There are 160 certified treatment facilities. This is the level of implementations we are talking about. But when we talk about India, you see, I don't have to go into this heavy slide. We all are aware of it. This is the automotive segment. We have talked in the last 2 days about this. The only yellow part onto the bottom left is something which I just want to brush on, that automobile segment in India is further going to go ahead. There is an auto mission by the government. There are national electric mobility missions, and all these things do give a message that this segment is going to grow more and more. What is happening in terms of the end-of-life vehicles, I don't need to get into. We already had a wonderful presentation by Mr. Sujit yesterday. These people do use the methods which are crude, unscientific. They dismantle them, but I'll just show you some snapshots from what we have been able to gather. These are all the photographs done while doing the dismantling of these and doing some calculations. And finally, if you see, that's how into the circular way, 4 or 5 people in around 1 hour to 1 hour 15 minutes do dismantle absolutely specific vehicle, and finally the vehicle goes like this. It will move out on some or the other such arrangement. They even go for the dismantling in such a way that they even try to remove the aluminum out of the engine, so that the person to whom they are giving iron and aluminum, there's no impurities into it. Everyone is working, they are trying to dismantle and take out various kind of material, and this is what finally is left over, in this case just from one specific thought. So overall, there is already a system of informal segment, which we talked yesterday. There are primary, secondary, and tertiary such kind of dealers. There are markets. There are reuse and refurbish. There are traders, and there are second-hand markets, second-hand vehicle markets, and there is some sort of mechanism which is already in there. Finally, they make such kind of cubes. The people relevant to the seats take the seats away. And if you just allow me to put this specific thing in a different prospect, you will see that the dismantlers, if there are particles which do again go into the market, there is some sort of a circularity here. But the iron which comes out, like in this case, it was a case of an iron. We have done it for iron, copper, and aluminum all. They go to the iron markets. For example, in North India, it is Mandi Gobindgarh, which is called as a big market, which catches quite huge amount of the domestic and the international iron which is imported. And there have been cases reported which we investigated that it is going into the construction sector, no doubt about that. But even in the mobility sector, for making of ingots, for bars, for flat bar, galvanizing coils, there are people who are buying it and then making some components which are going back to the automobile segment. So small amount of circularity is already there. These are the bottom, if you see, mobility sector components which are being meant by the iron which is going in there. This is yet to be published. So when we talk about ELV management and talk about India, we are almost nowhere. We are even not doing proper depollutions and all that. So this slide only talks about that the secondary resource material is always going to be better in terms of comparison with the virgin material. So we already have these calculations with us, that how the electric arc furnace route consumes how much less than when we talk about the basic oxygen steel making furnaces. So this is the composition, the iron, ferrous, and the non-ferrous. And within the non-ferrous, if you see, mainly it is the aluminum and few are the rest of the things. This was a sample of 5 which we have conducted, and the result looks like this. In context of India also, there is somewhere around 76% of iron. It is absolutely at par with what you see elsewhere when we talk about the ELV composition of. We even have tried to do a recyclability and recoverability potential of 5 samples, and only talking about the dismantlers. Mass has come to them and what they have been able to do. The result is that on an average, it was 88 to 91%. All this is published, and I will just share that link also. Automobile, there have been, in terms of directives and the laws, quite a lot of work which has already been done, but yet a long way to go. For example, Automotive Industrial Standard AIS 129 has been the base Bible document, if I may say so, for bringing quite a number of work when we talk about it, ELV in India. SIAM has been an organization who has been working quite hard to bring all these, and this AIS 129 is again following ISO 22628. All these are published. CPCB in our country have already the guidelines which mainly talks about the shared responsibility, where the mechanism for ELV declaration, deregistration has to be there. And I'm coming to my concluding remarks, which have 2 slides. Or I would just like to end upon that we know that they are using unscientific and crude methods. There is depollution absolutely neglected. Most of the ELV mass have some issues, and these issues are being because of the 1.5% of depollution which they don't do, because 1.5% of the total accumulated oil, the fluid which comes out of this, is something which is creating a lot of problems with these people. If I talk about rare earth metals, they are lost. There is a scrap policy already which says that somewhere around 5 million vehicles will be there by next year if it has been implemented. So these people who are already there in the informal sector will end up to do what they want to do. It is to be then so some or the other way stopped. The sector is also used for the stolen vehicles. So this is also an angle because of which they most of the time come under the radar. And we have talked, acknowledgement is something which is not coming to them. I do say that yes, they are craftsmen in some or the other way, but they cannot flourish anymore like this in a country like India. This yellow portion or this pink portion is what is my personal opinion. I just give you two examples to leave some thoughts. You see, the following some initiatives from the developed world, India can customize the overall ELV management as per the country's specific situation. We talked about that yesterday also, but not like absolutely removing someone. I have two examples. You see, if we just remove from these two studies, car seats, they play an important role in the generation of auto shredder residue because they are the main source of the polyurethane resins and the textiles. If they are removed, accounting because they account for 20% of the overall, so this much amount of ASR will be reduced. If we remove the bumpers, tires, fuel tanks, and the glass, total ASR weight, in this case study, it has already been proven 30% reduction is possible when we talk about these specific things. So the recycling rate can go up to 7%. So with these words, I will be coming towards my, I think, last slide. Yeah, sorry, is the last one. The shredder is a century-old phenomena. I would just like to make a mention of it, but there are changes happening onto it. What has worked in EU, Japan may not work for Delhi, China, Istanbul, and Philippines. So there has to be some different kind of mechanism for our country. Very important is that original equipment manufacturers, and there is already some start onto it. They should come across with some, they should encourage for putting systems in place for design for recycle, design for dismantling, for bringing the eco design aspect when they are making such kind of work. And as stated in CPCB guidelines, shared responsibility is something probably we can look forward for. Last, I would say that if this cannot be done now, because there are quite a lot of conducive environment as of now being made by the government. Over the last 3 years, what has happened in this segment has not been there since around 30 years of the automobile segment flourishing. So things are bettering in here. To conclude, I would say that end-of-life waste stream is a potential secondary resource material, and that is one way to tackle the global resource scarcity by creating circular economy examples. If we just bring them back into the material cycle, and the vehicle, when it is the end of life, is still something which gives a lot of smiles, and that's how the directives and the legislatives should not ignore such kind of aspects when we talked about the country like India. I may say that the dismantlers and all these people have been craftsmen, but they cannot further work anymore on this specific kind of regime. With this, I come to my last slide. I thank all of you. I can see you guys now because before that I was not able to see anyone. I hope because the system is that when I'm doing the presentation, I was not able to look into. I hope I have done some justice to the topic I was talking about. Thank you so very much. Over to you, my dear friend.
Justice? Have you done justice to that? Wow. 20, all of that in 20 minutes. That's amazing. So much detail, so many things to think about. And I'd just like to say to everybody who's listening to that, we will put Lalit's PPT online a little bit later, down in the chat section for you to pick up, so you can go over that, because there was a lot of, it moved very fast. And also, is that my background?
No, that was mine.
Okay, sorry. And also, just to make everyone aware that once we finish this session today, people in the background will be busy editing videos, getting all the PPTs, and we'll be uploading that onto our web pages, not onto also Recycling World, but also onto the ICCE website as well. So you can find everything there within hopefully the next 24 hours. Lalit, thank you so much for that. That was so comprehensive. That was just great. And I've seen some questions are coming through, and please, and everybody else, please ask questions as we do. But Lalit, I've made a load of notes and I don't know where to start, but You talked at the beginning about the directives in Europe, Korea, America, etc., or the equivalent, shall we say. I can't imagine that you could just drop that directive, boom, into India, and it will fix everything. But what would you say is the biggest challenge to developing a directive? You did talk about the informal sector and things like that, but what would you sort of say would be the first thing that needs to be addressed?
See, as we have talked about this yesterday also, the first thing has to be, in my opinion, you know, when there are not good times, you have to look somewhere so that you can inspire yourselves. We don't have pilots even in our country. There has to be some people who have to come. They can be automobile industry, that can be a shared business model wherein there are some people who come across with where they set up. We have the formal setup, we talked about these things, but I'm talking about the pilots wherein the informal segment is being hand-holded in such a fashion that they, to some extent, they come across to a situation where they are able to do the depollution with the support, with the brackets of the people who are really from the authorities, from the regulation part and all that. So if this works, if we make it happen at 2 or 4 or 5 geographical locations, that would be the first start. 2 already have started. There are quite a number of people who have started coming. Mahindra is one, and we know that there are other players also who are coming across with. 3, I would say there has to be appropriate blend of come across with some sort of incentives, with some sort of recognition, with some sort of hand-holding support for such kind of people who are already in there. Because on one side, if it is true that informal segment cannot take care of the overall burden of country in the fashion they are working, even the formal sector will not be able to do it in the time to come, because the amount of material we do have is huge. So there has to be, that's why there has to be, it has to be shoulders by everyone, and small start has to be there, and pilot is one thing with which something should really come across with.
Yeah, I agree. I think you covered a lot there, and I want to go on to this question because I think this leads into what you're saying. I think it contains a key word, and I think here. So this is a question from Neil Jocelyn, and he says, "Truly fascinating, Lalit," and I think everyone can agree with that. That was a great presentation. And can you describe the value of ELV recycling in India to both the vehicle owner and to industry? Basically, is there money in it for stakeholders? And that's the key word, isn't it? Where is the money to be made? So if you can answer that or have your opinion on that, that would be great.
See, I have very closely worked with the informal sector during the research part, and to say and to answer to you, there is money in it. And how? Number one, see, as it's a traditional sort of work which these people were doing. Like you heard that in Delhi, there was a big, the market which we are talking about in Delhi was, by the way, one of the biggest in Asia before it wasn't there. So these people were working elsewhere. This was their third shift and all. And there are generations involved in it. We had a word about this yesterday, that the young generation coming across with is the one who is little forward looking, but the older generations are not. So there is a huge amount of money which is already in there. That's why these people are working. And that's the reason that the formal setups are also coming in big way. There is. The only point is that when will formally this money will start flowing back to them? And the money is lying in the material. If you really talk about, see, I give you an example of what they are doing with the even the small thing, which is out of depollution, you have quite a number of liquid which comes out. There is a sort of a particular person on the bicycle who moves around in these markets in the morning and in the evening, who take this material also for very minute amount of money. Like in Indian terms, it would be 1/3 of the euro per liter. He's always there into the market, he takes it. So what I'm trying to say is that if there is money for even that particular gentleman who is taking the waste of a depollution, certainly the people who are dealing into the metals, the ferrous metals and plastics and glasses, there is a huge amount of money into it. The only point is it is to be dealt in a appropriate fashion, which is unfortunately not being done till now.
Okay. Okay, that's great. I think this again leads on to with what you're saying, and this is has had 2 votes, and this is from Tim McCarthy. Again, so much information. But his question is, with so many ELVs heading to come off the road with a new policy in 2022, how will the dismantling processes be managed, controlled with so few licensed dismantlers? Are we going to have are you going to be seeing an influx of people trying to take their cars off the road, and will it be able to be managed?
Now that's a big question even to people who are into it, that how it is going to be managed, because as I've shown in one of the slides with the help with the introduction of the new scrap policy which we talked about, our from Terry, we had something which we heard about somewhere around 5 million vehicles would be there during this season next year, how we are going to talk about and the deal with. See, somehow India is incredible in all the sense, if I may say so. This would also be dealt in some or the other way. But yes, this is not the India which we look forward for. This is not the segment which we look forward for. So to be very frank, I don't have an answer how it would be. But indirectly, I am allowed to say that you will see it. If there would be that much of amount of the material in terms of end-of-life vehicles which is going to come, some or the other way it would be dealt with the informal segment only, because within 1 year not much is going to change into the formal. Yesterday we had, I think it was Mr. Sumit who made a mention of it, that still 99% is being yet dealt by the informal segment. So it would be the informal segment only who will be talking and discussing. But then let's see what the government has for the formal segment. They are already backing it up. They may come across with some sort of arrangements wherein they are making some kind of mechanisms which would further enhance that the material goes to the formal setups. Like government have already mentioned that, declared it during all the government vehicles which are coming under the preview of the scrap policy next year, first thing they will do is that they will discard the government vehicles. So where these government vehicles will go? They'll go to the formal setups. So a segment is going to be there into the formal anyway, but I'm sure quite a lot of flow would be there onto that side. Let's see, but that's what I can answer, my dear.
I think there is such a path to walk down here in India that no one can really predict, but there's a lot of people dedicated to making sure that we take the correct path as much as possible. I'd just like to ask this final question because I'm aware of the time, and this is from Valiapan. I hope I pronounced that correctly. If not, I apologize. And his question is related to ferrous metal utilization. What is the quality of scrap that that can be suitable for deriving the best recycling efficiency? If parts are completely corroded, the recycling process may not be. And then he leads on with that. There is no specific corrosion management policy available in India to extend the life and then subject the EL vehicle for recycling. I hope that makes sense. And if I'm aware of time, Lalit, so as a concise reply as possible would be great.
See, I'll try to. We don't have the segregation of the kind of iron or the ferrous metals which are coming across from various segments, and same is the case with this ELV segment too. It goes to the melting. It goes to the industry which melt them down into and making bars or construction materials and all that. So to answer you, yes, the quality as such criteria is not in there when we talk about that this is a A grade or a B grade or a C grade kind of scrap which is coming out of it. They simply take the bulk and try to bring it back into some sort of the material recycling. So this is what is happening as such in the domestic flow of ferrous metal which is coming into the country, in the northern part at least, what we have tried to study.